Captain Zarrar had witnessed the unthinkable before. He had seen suns collapse like dying embers and black holes roar open like wounds in the fabric of the void, but nothing in all his years of service aboard the long-range research vessel Oblivion's Wake had prepared him for the events unfolding beyond the Dorsan expanse. The transmission had been weak, barely a whisper, coded in an indecipherable lattice of alien mathematics. It had come from a sector where no life was supposed to exist, where the fabric of the universe was frayed and stretched thin over impossible distances. It should have been ignored, catalogued as background noise, an anomaly, but Zarrar had always been a man who could not leave questions unanswered. He ordered the course correction. They plunged into the dark without knowing that they were no longer just crossing distance, but boundaries not meant to be crossed. As they approached the source, the stars themselves seemed wrong. They shifted and bled, their light leaking into hues no human eye was built to perceive, distorting the very laws that kept flesh and bone anchored to meaning. Instruments failed to agree on simple facts: mass, distance, time. The walls of the ship groaned like a living thing under pressures that did not exist in any standard model. The crew began to hear things, whispers not in the corridors but in their own minds, as if the void itself was growing aware of their intrusion. And still, Captain Zarrar pushed forward, drawn by a terrible gravity of curiosity he could neither explain nor resist. The source of the transmission lay within a yawning chasm of nothingness, no stars, no dust, no light, just a black wound, deeper and more absolute than any black hole. As Oblivion's Wake edged closer, a shape began to emerge at the center of the void, not by the reflection of light, but by the distortion of perception itself, a wrongness against the absence. It resembled a structure, a monument, made not of matter but of broken concepts, ideas twisted into geometries that stabbed the mind. It hurt to look at it. Each glance seemed to peel back layers of human understanding, exposing the fragile machinery of reason itself to the howling insanity beneath. Captain Zarrar ordered a closer scan. It was not a signal they had detected, he realized. It was a rupture, a bleeding between worlds, and now, drawn too close, they could not look away. Time ceased to flow properly aboard the ship. Crew members reported entire lifetimes of dreams and nightmares passing between blinking their eyes. One by one, they succumbed to a creeping malaise, a despondent madness, as if their souls recognized the futility of resisting what was coming. Zarrar remained in command, though he could feel the fraying at the edges of his own sanity. He reviewed the logs obsessively, trying to piece together the order of events, but each time the sequence shifted, rearranging itself into new configurations. Yesterday's memories contradicted today's, and the faces of the crew became unfamiliar, then monstrous. Yet the core remained, the structure in the void and the urgent need to understand. Driven by forces he could no longer claim were his own, Captain Zarrar authorized a boarding mission. 3 volunteers donned enhanced exosuits, fitted with layers of quantum shielding, and launched toward the monument. Their signals degraded almost instantly, flickering into screams distorted beyond recognition, before cutting out altogether. The suits, however, continued to transmit biometric data, bodies alive but minds, empty, vessels hollowed out. Something had reached into them and scooped them clean. Still, Zarrar could not retreat. He began to dream of the monument, to feel its textures against his skin, to smell the impossible stench of its existence, a sour rot of collapsing realities. He awoke to find marks on his flesh, sigils burned into his skin without heat or flame, patterns that seemed to crawl when viewed from the corner of the eye. In a final act of both desperation and compulsion, Captain Zarrar ordered the Oblivion's Wake itself into the heart of the rupture. As they crossed the threshold, the universe behind them fell away like ash on the wind. Stars died, the laws of physics dissolved, and space became an endless, seething ocean of colors too saturated to exist. The ship twisted into forms not allowed by Euclidean space. He could hear the crew screaming from the walls, from the pipes, from within himself. Their bodies remained intact, but their consciousness had unraveled, absorbed into the living wound they had willingly embraced. Captain Zarrar alone retained some vestige of individuality, perhaps by design. The monument loomed ahead, larger than worlds, now revealing its true nature, a bridge, a gate, a wound that yawned between two clashing realities, neither compatible with the other. He saw now the truth. The universe was not alone. There were others, vast, ancient, and indifferent, pressing against the membrane of reality like blind, squirming things eager to devour or infect or overwrite. The rupture was not a call, it was a warning. As the ship approached the threshold, Captain Zarrar perceived beings beyond the gate, not with his eyes but with the ruined remnants of his mind. They were not gods, for gods implied some connection to humanity. These were things that existed without concept of compassion, malice, or purpose. They simply were, and they were wrong in every possible way. Limbs that folded into dimensions that should not exist, mouths that spoke in screams made of broken time, eyes that opened inside out, leaking madness. They were not coming, they were already here. Each collision of universes birthed horrors beyond comprehension, and humanity's presence had thinned the veil even further. Captain Zarrar realized the final, shattering truth. It was not a single incursion. It was a cascading collapse. Every act of exploration, every question asked without caution, every edge pushed against the unknown frayed the barriers that kept the invaders at bay. Humanity's curiosity was the infection, the rot from within. As the ship finally merged with the monument, Captain Zarrar's body was unmade and remade endlessly, a perpetual cycle of becoming and undoing, each version slightly less human than the last. His consciousness spread thin, stretched across eons and dead stars, forced to witness the unmaking of countless realities. In one splinter of himself, he walked through dead cities made of frozen screams. In another, he swam in oceans of liquid forgetting, each drop erasing lifetimes. In another still, he was nothing but a thought, drifting forever through the collapsed corridors of decaying worlds. And still, he felt the gaze of the others, the beings from beyond, pressing against him, studying, perhaps even acknowledging, before losing interest and casting him aside like a broken toy. Time ceased to have meaning. Eventually, Captain Zarrar found himself standing, if the concept still applied, before a mirror made not of glass, but of understanding itself. In the reflection, he saw not his face, but the cumulative horrors he had unleashed. Worlds, countless and screaming, twisted into impossible configurations, souls devoured by ravenous hungers that knew no bounds, children born to universes that died before their first breath. It was not guilt he felt, but a cold, inevitable comprehension. This was always the end game. Life itself, thought itself, was a vector, a contagion that weakened the barriers, that called the predators to feed. Captain Zarrar would remain here, a witness to the unraveling, not as punishment, but as necessity. Someone had to know, someone had to watch as the final filaments of reality were torn and consumed, and perhaps in some forgotten whisper of his mind, he would transmit a warning back across the dying strands of spacetime, a final desperate plea that would fall on deaf, doomed ears. Because the truth was too large to contain, too poisonous to survive, humanity would hear, and just like him they would come, drawn by the same insatiable hunger to understand, to know, to touch what must not be touched. The universes would collide, and from the collisions the invaders would thrive, birthing new nightmares in the corpse of what was. Captain Zarrar screamed, but there was no mouth left to scream with, no ears left to hear, no minds left to comprehend. Only the endless, gnawing dark remained, and within it, the slow, inevitable spread of corruption. And somewhere, in the remains of what was once a vibrant, naive species, the question would rise again, what lies beyond? And the answer would come, not in words, but in the devouring silence, in the unmaking of everything they had ever been, a price paid not with blood or sacrifice, but with the surrender of all meaning, all structure, all hope. Captain Zarrar's final fragmented thought echoed across the void like a dying star's last gasp. Some truths are prisons, and some prisons have no doors. Some knowledge is a slow, inescapable death. And by reaching too far, by seeking too much, we open not gates, but graves too vast for any soul to ever fill. Thus, the incursion would never truly end. It would spread and spread and spread until the last flicker of ordered reality blinked out, leaving only the cold, mindless hunger of impossible things, forever feeding, forever expanding in the endless ruin of all that once dared to dream. This is Dark Universe Files. Stay curious, but not too curious.